Hey everybody, MSOM 601, Lesson 2 review, Lesson 3 preview coming to you today from the rooftop of our flat here in Seattle. It's a sunny day in Seattle in January, and anytime it's a sunny day in Seattle in January, you want to make sure that you're outside. So here on the rooftop, I'm going to spin this around so you get a chance to see the skyline. It's a little foggy downtown today, but there is the skyline of downtown Seattle. Hopefully you can see that. We live in a little community called Wallingford, which is a Seattle community. Here it takes us about 45 minutes or so to walk downtown from here, but it's a lovely, lovely walk, and we enjoy Seattle. If you've never been here, I would encourage you to spend some time up here. It's a great place to hang out. For those of you with Boeing, at some point in time you'll be here. You'll probably be south of the city in Renton or north of the city in Everett. But make sure you have time to come down to the city. Let's talk a little bit about Lesson 2. Lesson 2 had a question in the discussion board that asked you to talk about the differences between strategic thinking and critical thinking. And trust me, those are two different things. I looked at some of your comments this week before I walked out on the deck this morning, and those were really good. I mentioned last week that sometimes business people have a really difficult time with this question because they will always, not always, it will sometimes default to definitions of strategic thinking because they are all involved in strategy. Well, strategic thinking and critical thinking are different, and I'll make some comments on that in the grade book. Make sure you take a look at those because that'll highlight some of my thoughts on that discussion question. And then the case study talked about thinking too narrowly or thinking unrealistically. Now think about this for a second. Depending on what your thinking style is, I happen to be my critical thinking style is analytical. I tend to think too narrowly on certain things, versus someone who may be open-minded or someone who may be inquisitive. They think sometimes unrealistically. They will have a broad view of something. They will consider some things that I will not consider. Now, does that make me right and them wrong? No. It just makes us, again, different. And so my hope is, this is the last one of the kind of the personal case study evaluations. My hope is as you're going through these, that you realize that you need to surround yourself today and in the future as a future manager with people who think differently. I used to have people who were just my wild thinkers. I mean, those people who used to come up with some really funky stuff. And many times they were just totally off base with what they were thinking about. But every once in a while, they hit a home run. And so for those people who have the ability or actually have the thinking style that is open-minded, that can think about some things that may appear to be unrealistic, I don't discount those. So I'd encourage you as a manager, just don't discount an individual because you don't like the way that they present it and because they are much different than you are. Also, for heaven's sake, don't stack the team as you hire them with people exactly like you. Because I guarantee you that's a recipe for failure. And so my hope is, from an application perspective, on all of these as it relates to these critical thinking personal assessments, that it opens your eyes to look at people differently and to look at the value that people add to the team just by being different than you. So think about that a little bit. All right, discussion 3, lesson 3, let's move on. Discussion 3 is a really important one. The discussion question talks about the importance of defining the problem. Now, I'll give you, if you haven't already seen it, you may want to Google it and look it up. Albert Einstein had something to say about defining the problem. But so many times in the rush of business today, people want to get immediately to the solution. And they should spend more time defining the problem than they do developing the solution. And so it talks about in the discussion board, and I'll be looking forward to your research, your comments on that, to talk about the importance that it takes in defining the problem. If you look at that and apply the red model to that, defining the problem really starts with recognizing the assumptions. And so the R in red really helps in defining defining the problems. Discussion 3.2 is kind of unique, and I apologize in advance for the graininess of the video that's there. But it's a technique that many of you may have used that have a Six Sigma background. It's called the is-not technique. And the is-not technique is really an opportunity for you to help narrow down a particular problem. And it takes you through a very organized step-by-step process of looking at and defining the problem. Because, I mean, there's so much time wasted when you don't define the problem. I mean, it's one of those things where you actually propose a solution, you implement a solution, it doesn't work, you know, and then you scratch your head and go, I wonder why it didn't work. Well, it didn't work because you didn't find enough time defining the problem, or you proposed a solution for something that really wasn't the problem. And so, again, this is really a key lesson part in critical thinking, problem solving, is the ability, or would be the ability, to define the problem. And then the case study this week is one that talks about dentists, and it gives you an opportunity to look at a company as they are faced with an issue with one of their customers or their group of customers. And so I encourage you to take a look at those. And case studies are really kind of unique sometimes because they don't give you a whole lot of direction. They don't say, what I want you to do is X, Y, Z, and fill it out this way. Also graduate studies like that as well. If you were in the undergraduate world, I'd probably have to give you a list of 10 things to talk about. But I encourage you on this one, because you're graduate students now, to take a look at this and make sure that wherever your research takes you is where you allow this one to go. I want to bounce back. I just thought about this. I want to bounce back 1 second to thinking narrowly and thinking unrealistically, and look at Amina's story. If you think about Amina's story and the issue that and the problem that they were having to solve. I mean, when Kevin Gerard came across Amina, if he wasn't one who could potentially think unrealistically, then I doubt very seriously if Amina would be alive today. But because he had the ability to look at this and to be really unrealistic in his thought process, you know, they may not have come up with all the solutions. I would have been on the other end thinking, you know, very analytically about this and saying, there's no way we can get this young lady out of the theater of war in Iraq, much less get the tribal elders in Iraq to approve her coming just with her mother. There's no way we could finance this. There's no way we can get this young lady across Jordan to Amman to get on the plane to take her home. She's much too sick. And once we get her home, there's going to be a backlash there, you know, and the whole religious and cultural issues that are there. I mean, so you think about that. Kevin Gerard, even being able to approach this, had to think unrealistically in order for this to even have an idea or even get started. And so, sorry for that last minute add-on, but I was just thinking about that as I was going through this process today. One other thing before I sign off here, I want to talk a little bit about introductions and conclusions. Now, you're going to be doing introductions and conclusions in all your case studies. You'll also do them in the course project. But introductions and conclusions are incredibly important, not only in business proposals, but in academic papers and so on and so on and so on. And the reason that they are, in my mind, is introductions give the reader an opportunity to understand what you're trying to get across, why it's important, and then the method that you want to for them to understand as you walk them through it a little bit later. Nothing more, nothing less. And so I always encourage people to be very overt in their introductions. It says, this paper will, by doing this, in order to demonstrate this. And so I would encourage you in your introductions to do it that way. And then your conclusions are really your last opportunity to sell your ideas, sell your points, sell your research to the reader. And so it needs to be bold, pithy, and straight to the point, that really shows the impact of what you're asking that reader to consider. In the case of a business person, you know, what you're asking them to approve, and so on. And so I would encourage you to not use introductions and conclusions as throwaways. And then finally, both on your course project, both for the introduction and conclusion, That should be very fluid. So your introduction and conclusion, your final one won't be done until you put the finishing touches on your paper, because you're not going to understand what your conclusion is until your research is done. And so when you submit part 2 of your course project, you may just have the introduction and conclusion headings there and put TBD underneath them, because again, you may be waiting to determine what the key areas are going to be and what the key conclusions are going to be. And I would certainly hope that's the case. But make sure to include those, just so that I get the feeling that you're going to understand that introductions and conclusions are important in what you do. So I'm going to be in town all week. I'll be here next Sunday for the big Seattle Seahawks game. Go Hawks! And then I leave out on February the 3rd for Bangkok. And I will spend the rest of the term, I'll be gone for 6 weeks, I'll spend the rest of the term in Southeast Asia. And hopefully be able to do some videos from Southeast Asia and different locales. But I say that to say this, again, I'm going to be very accessible. Hopefully many of you who've sent me an email, I've been able to get back in touch with you in a matter of minutes. So my hope is that again, you see no slowness in my response to you, and certainly with grading, I try and do that very quickly as well. So everybody, hopefully this has been helpful for you in Lesson 2 recap, Lesson 3 preview. You all have a great week and keep studying. Thanks.